So I'm sitting in Vake Park. I came out of my house where it is nice and cool and thought I would get into the sun going down, but actually there are clouds in the sky, which are not registered clouds by the BBC or any other weather service. And the weather is so humid. I'm hardly doing anything, and the sweat is just accumulating on my body. There's just a sense of oppression. You almost don't feel there's any room to move or breathe. There are crickets in all the trees here. I had some French fry mess with some pieces of what they called schnitzel chicken, smothered in a way too sloppy barbecue sauce, as they called it. I came out here just to sit and read, maybe eat a little, some fries. I like their fries, but this one was way too sloppy. I won't get it again. But I'm just really impressed or oppressed by this weather. And it looks like it's going to rain up above. Maybe it will. That'd be nice. Downpour. Who knows where this water came from? Probably from the south. But anyway, it's an enjoyable day. I'm going to go back soon because it is nice and cool in my house. Thanks to I have 3 air conditioners. 2 are on really low speed right now. Greetings and welcome to a far too hot day. I just I took that video a couple of days ago, actually late at the very end of July, and it was so hot. And today is far hotter, and so there we are. Hello, Michael. Good to see you there. See who else shows up. Anyone else care to identify themselves? And speaking of Naked Gun, the reason I actually delayed this, I originally had it set for 2 hours earlier, was because I forgot I'd also scheduled going to see Naked Gun tonight. And just given the way things are, there's no way I could undo my scheduling of the movie. So I went and saw it, and I am back. I'll talk about it a little bit later. We've got things to talk about. But one of the things I've been thinking about, well, I'll wait until more people come. And we'll put that aside. I do have a couple of things from my Patreon here that are generally just for people from the Patreon channel. But I thought, well, I'm trying to get people interested in that. And this is a good time to do it. And I thought I'd show you some of what you're not normally getting on this channel here. So, but I'm going to wait to play some of those things as well. I came on a little bit early here just because. But yeah, oh my goodness. It is just so hot today. I can't believe how hot it actually is. And yeah, so I am doing well, but just going outside, going to the movies. I got on a bus and then walked around for a bit, and I just come back and even though there was air conditioning in the movie, thankfully, I'm just totally drained by doing that. It's in American terms, it's very close to 100. It's almost today was almost 37, 38 in that range for Celsius thinkers. Yeah, just too hot, and there's a humidity in the air. If this is supposed to go on, this very high heat is supposed to go on for at least another 6 days. And meanwhile, I have liquid, and so I am fine. I'm going to play a piece of music soon here in a moment. There's one other thing I have to set up that I forgot to set up because my brain is broken by the all the heat. I mean, I just arrived here and spent the first half hour just like, trying to get to the air conditioner, just pointing straight at me. But yeah, we've got some interesting stuff today. I've got some ideas that I figured I would. I want to get people talking about certain ideas. I've been thinking about doing two videos in particular. One is suspiciously called "What is a Man?" and the other one is called "Men and Women Go Shopping," and the differences between it. And that might sound like a boring topic, but I guarantee you, by the time I'm done with that, you'll be very surprised. So we'll do that. Let me go to a bit of cooling classical music here. Lucy Horch plays some sort of massive recorder. I believe this is something like La Folia. Yeah, so let's play this. Be back in about 5 minutes. And get yourself ready for some questions about. I want to hear your questions about what you think it means to be a man. And it doesn't matter to me whether you're a man or a woman. Folia is one of my favorite all-time bits of Baroque dance music, and there's some just fascinating versions of it. I have actually a have got a collection of about 10 different versions of that, and I've been thinking of perhaps doing a video on it sometime. I actually have plans for so many videos, and I've collected things. But my problem is I want to do a good job. I watched the way, Paul just basically does all these videos, Paul Vanderklay, and he records them, and then they're basically done, and he doesn't edit them. I wish I could do that. Another person I watch, Andy Edwards, whom I had a discussion with a couple months ago, he does it the same way. It's like, I guess that's like older guys' way to do stuff, is just make it as with no fuss as possible. And they both put out lots of videos. I don't do that, so I can't get in on the big, not big bucks, but you know what I'm saying. So let's see, what have we got here? Okay, Michael, there's two notions of what a man is that are at war with each other in America: the strong, stoic, courageous individual, and the empathetic man in touch with his feelings. And see, now here's the thing. To me, those are the same person. And but I think there are a lot of ideas floating around out there that are, yeah. Thanks, James. Yeah, editing videos is my bane. Yeah, it's like if you could just simply, and James, you don't do nearly as much as I do. I wish I had a big enough audience that I could do like one a month. But then again, I'm stupid enough to have 5 channels. So one of them, the crematorium, I don't ever care about that one. Although I've got one video on there that's like 15,000, but I can't monetize it because it's some AI atrocity that I made to demonstrate a point with Plastic Bertrand, Saflan pour moi, and Billie Eilish's voice. And that one gets noticed. But of course, even if I could monetize, which I can't, which is why people need to join up over on Patreon. Even if I could monetize from my bunker here in Georgia, I still wouldn't make a dime on all that. So I have some videos on my Gravity from Above channel, which have 100,000 views. And I wish, those are my videos, I wish that I could get something from them. But alas, can't do that. I mean, I just can't monetize stuff. And here's the weird thing. I'm going to talk about Patreon later, but I'll mention it here. My hope was to make some money from that. And now I find out I lose about 30% of whatever money I make from that. So such is life. I'm obviously not doing this to be rich. So, yeah. So I just got back from seeing Naked Gun, and Michael, you were just asking about that. And I don't know if you've seen the original movies from the late 80s, early 90s, which are quite funny in a really stupid but enjoyable way. And my feeling is that this one wasn't as good as the first 2 of the original, but it was better than the third one. Now, I just watched all those. I have them here. And also the Police Squad, which was the television show they were based on. There were 6 short episodes, 25 minutes each of those. And I thought it was enjoyable. They need to push it a bit more and to get a little more, what can we say, edgy for Hollywood these days, which would be to really make, there were some jokes that were, they were pushing an edge, but it wasn't an edge which would really make you go, oh, I can't believe they said that, kind of thing, which is what they needed to do to make that stick. But at the same time, it was certainly enjoyable. And because of the nature of those movies, there's enough of a scattershot of so many jokes coming at you that you're bound to laugh at something. Some of them are tasteless, and that's just the nature of those movies. Others of them, there's some subtle stuff that you don't notice, and you think about it later and go, "Oh, okay, okay." And then there's some extremely stupid humor. Liam Neeson does a pretty good job, I would say. Although I would say they were pushing it hard. Some of the jokes were a little more than they needed to be, and it didn't quite. I mean, I think I see what they were trying to do. They were trying to base the Naked Gun for 2025 on Liam Neeson's character in his various action movies. You know, I am a man with a specific set of skills, kind of thing, as opposed to basing it more on the Leslie Nielsen version, which was kind of like guy walks around clueless about everything, and yet he never breaks smile. And Neeson doesn't either. But if they make more of these, it might do well. I was in Georgia, of all places, here in Tbilisi, and the theater was pretty packed for a movie which has a lot of humor, which I'm sure went over a lot of people who do not have English as a first language. You know, there were references to American football teams. There was a Bill Cosby joke, which I'm sure meant absolutely nothing to them. But at the same time, there's enough visual humor in these that I think that it translates. And there were certain parts where the audience was really laughing, and it was through visual humor, whereas I think an American audience would laugh more through certain things that were said at certain times. So, is it the second coming of comedy in movies? No. And like I said, we'll see how it does financially. I would like to see more. I'm not sure if I want to see more. You know, supposedly there's another Scary Movie. I never saw the Scary Movie franchise, especially even the first one, as being the pinnacle of anything great. But it's strange that times we need more comedies. And comedies have been relegated to bizarre slots. A lot of great stand-up comedy, actually on Netflix of all places. But their actual feature film comedies were in a kind of a low place for that. And so you take whatever you could get, and I took this one. And I'm not alone thinking that they could have pushed it a bit more and really made it something special. But we'll take what we get. So if anyone has any thoughts about Naked Gun, if you've seen it or whatever, feel free. Or if you've seen the original ones. Do I think that Naked Gun is too farcical for comedy? Or people just don't know how to make funny movies anymore? No, part of the problem is you can't be too farcical for comedy. Farce is a species of comedy. And it's the one that is the most exaggerated. It can be satirical, and satire is its own species of comedy. So you can have a comedy that is satirical and not be farcical, and another comedy that's farcical and not be satirical. This one was not particularly satirical, but it was really farcical. And it was also indulged in slapstick comedy. Slapstick comedy is the species of comedy which involves physical gags, pratfalls, slipping on a banana peel, doing really stupid things and funny things physically, of which the silent comedians, particularly Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, but there were other people as well. And then you get to people like the Marx Brothers were also physical, but they also had, because they were among the first talking comedians, they had the verbal skills, which is a whole different zone. So I think that, yeah, it was really farcical. I mean, like I say, I think more Georgians are going to come see this, which is really odd. For instance, one thing that does not do well here in Georgia at all are American high school and college comedies. Why? They don't even know what they're looking at. We tend to, in America, think that that kind of comedy must be universal, that Animal House or the various like teen comedies from the late, not the spoof, just another teen comedy or whatever. That somehow that's universal. They're not, because what we think is normal in high school is absolutely abnormal in other schools. And one of the main ways in which it is our schools in North America, and this includes Canada, includes the sports activities in the school. And most schools do not. They separate these things. So through most of Europe, you have the sports teams, which are separate from the actual school. So you don't have the jocks. The jocks are not a part of, for instance, European education at all. You don't have then the real division between the jocks and the nerds. It's just, and we think that's universal, but that's our problem, because Americans tend to universalize their experience, especially in their media. See, what else have we got here? Yeah, I haven't seen Scary Movie 3. I saw Scary Movie 1, and it just didn't work for me. It just was like, this is too stupid. And but I am, I did see just not another, what was it? Just another teen comedy. I thought that one was fair because I do study these weird American teen comedies. I find them interesting as a species. So, but maybe someday I'll give that a look. What else have we got? Oh, okay. You went to the movie and saw Superman. Okay. Speaking of Superman, over on my Patreon, I have been accumulating some miniature reviews over there that don't appear on my Anadromous channel, which is, of course, where all the music and movie reviews go. And I've got one on Superman here, so I might as well play it. It's about 5 minutes long. What I'm doing here is I'm showing you why you should join my Patreon. And I'm, I'll give you a hint. If you join real soon, I'm changing the prices, but you can lock in a lower price. And if you look below in the description section here of the video on your end, you can find the Patreon address and go check that out, because I am going to raise the price and make it one price for everything, because I've just been looking at it, and that's the only way for me to get anything out of it. It's the double whammy of everything that I get off of Patreon. They take a sizable chunk. Then I put it into, it goes through PayPal. And then it gets translated into Georgian currency. And by the time that's done, they've literally siphoned off 30% of anything I make on Patreon. So if you support the channel, you can do it through Patreon. But also, if you support the channel through PayPal, I get more of the money. And what I'm going to do is make it so that people, I was just working on this today. Patreon is just not user friendly. But what I'm going to do is make it so that the people who contribute to PayPal will get the goodies over there. So, but one thing at a time. Here's my Superman review from my Patreon channel, and it's going to say this is Patreon only. You're getting a special thing. So let's check it out, shall we? Greetings, this is Byrne, and I thought I would just give you some quick impressions of the new Superman movie, directed by James Gunn, circa July 2025. And I decided it's just not worth a full review, but I had a few thoughts. And one was, at the beginning, there was something going on. It felt like it could have developed. And then they bring in this group called the Justice Gang. They bring in metaverse concepts. They bring in the jokey kind of humor. Too much. There's a big kaiju Godzilla-sized creature that Superman fights. Eventually the whole world is in danger, etc., etc. The usual. and there's even takes on, is it Israel, Gaza, or is it Russia, Ukraine?
something. It's all in there. Yeah, it's just disappointing that this let's subvert the tropes thing is in there. Although I could see they were trying not to make it woke. They were trying to. On one hand, they were trying to make it a more enjoyable film, but frankly, no. I mean, I didn't hate it. It was just extremely standard. If this film had come out after the first Avengers, before a lot of other things, if it had come out when the first Guardian of the Galaxy came out around that time, I think people would have enjoyed it more than they do now. I think we're just tired of the repetition of these things. And superhero movies have become such a formula. And they need to do what the sword and sandal or epic films of the early 60s had to do. Disappear for quite a while. They need to do what the musicals at the end of the 60s had to do. Disappear for a while or turn into things like Cabaret, which were a very different approach. I'm tired of superheroes, but I went to this one. I've missed the rest of them this year, but I went to this one because, interestingly enough, this is the one everyone put their hopes on. They were hoping that this would bring the superhero genre back. My feeling is they need to let it die for about 10 years. Or just shelve your material. Find some people who can direct this with the appropriate spirit. And what that appropriate spirit is hard to say now. Because they've so ruined what these movies actually could be. Everyone compares this to the Christopher Reeve as Superman and Richard Donner's 78, 70, I think it was 79. I saw it originally in France. Not France, the French part of Switzerland was dubbed into French. What a bizarre experience. It wasn't till years later that I caught up with it. But even in that form, I could feel it was a film of some kind of character. I've never been on the big train that says that's one of the greatest superhero movies. I think superhero movies are a lesser genre. They are basically, they're all comic book movies. And the best of them, say The Dark Knight, or Logan, or some of the ones that you can either treat it really goofily, which is what the 1960s Batman series did. And I was reading comics at the time that came out when I was a kid. But to me, the comics were better because they had more oddness to them, whereas the stuff on television was obviously, especially looking back on it, just totally camp. As a kid, I didn't take it that way because I didn't understand the concept. I just knew it was fun. But, yeah, it is my fervent hope. I know there's a Fantastic Four movie coming out any minute. That's going to die. Even if it makes a couple dollars, it's just, you can already tell it's completely compromised. I think one of the hints is that Pedro Pascal is in it. And that guy just needs to stop making movies, or just get away from successful movies or not successful movies once he gets into it. So, just a few thoughts for you on Superman. Should you see it? Only if you're a diehard fan. That's it. Or you're someone so invested in whither comic book movies are going. But apart from that, no. I much prefer some of the horror films that have come out this year, as per usual. But there are other good films too. I thought Warfare was one of the best films.
So, actually, I did see Fantastic Four, and I liked it more than I thought I would. I was kind of prognosticating there that it wasn't going to be that good. It was, again, they're very similar to each other. Enjoyable, but not, There's no depth there. At least it wasn't as bad as some of the other Marvel movies. But at the same time, you know, uh, to me, it's like I've seen enough superhero stuff. I feel like superheroes now, back in the late 1950s, early 1960s, there were a lot of biblical epics that were being made. And along with those was a weird Italian substrate of what we now call peplum movies. At that time, we just called them, Hercules movies or strongman movies or whatever. We didn't have any. When things first come out, no one really has a name for it. Although what I noticed today is that people try to nail a name on something as soon as they can, and by doing it, it's like pinning a live insect to a board. You're in the process of killing it as soon as you start naming it exactly. And I hear in horror films so many micro genres. It's just like someone says action horror, and I'm going like, oh come on, it's like if it's got vampires and there are guns, that doesn't make it more of an action movie than a horror film. It's like it's still got vampires. So it's like I get really frustrated with people who just kind of are constantly making up names for new genres, but that don't really. My feeling is that a lot of what's going on is people are making up names for genres who don't have any physical copies and don't have the onerous task of filing these on a shelf because it's actually a really enjoyable task. Because as soon as you say that to yourself, where does this really fit? Then you have a real world decision to make. Whereas this is why, I have a whole series of movies called, it's a genre. No one else seems to know this genre exists, and it's called Psycho Women. And it involves, the reason it's not called killer women, although a lot of them are, is because the psycho women category is a bit wider than, say, the psycho killer category or the slasher category, which is a very small section of the psycho killer section. So for me, it's interesting. And one thing that's weird is that now we have a lot of, so many horror films now are what is called genre bending. And the strange thing about that is that, like a lot of these psycho killer films, like All the Boys Love Mandy Lane, well, I have to file that somewhere, and I put it in the psycho women section. As soon as you do that, you've spoiled the movie. So that's a really strange aspect to so many of these newer kinds of films, is to actually classify it, is to spoil the film, because there are things spinning in and out on each other. And frankly, I don't care. I love the classification angle. Let's see, what else is going on here? Yeah, there's a movie called Weapons, and I've been hearing a lot of serious buzz about this one. It's coming out this month, and I just saw this movie called Bring Her Back, which came out about a month or so ago back in the States, but that just came out here this weekend with Naked Gun, and I saw that, and that one was just like, okay, this was pretty intense. This is a very amazing film, and I'm going to do, since it's already old news back in the States, I'm going to do a more detailed look at it pretty soon, so I'm accumulating. But that one was a brain fryer in the best way. But Weapons looks like that too. Weapons just, so far, everything I've heard about it is just like, I'm going to be lined up. No, nobody lines up to see movies in Georgia. That's what's really funny about living overseas, is that you don't have that culture here. I've never seen a line to get into a movie here once, ever. And I've been here 6 years plus. So, and you just think about the biggest line. But one of the things that's happened is that Thomas Flight, he has a YouTube channel, just did a very interesting video, which I highly recommend, about why the movie-going experience is so different. So it's Thomas Flight. Look up his channel. And one of the things he says is that so much of our experience now, we are so distracted. For instance, how often do you sit and watch a movie at home with your phone or laptop or whatever right there. So you're constantly, you can't get invested in it the same way. And so you now have audiences that go to the big screen, younger people who have no, I mean, it's not just younger people with their phones. I've seen people in their 50s do the same things. These things create these weird, neurotic sort of actions for us that we can't stop checking the phones. I mean, I've sat in ballets here, Swan Lake or something, really great performance, and you see people just like they can't turn their phone off as the opening music is playing. It's just like something's wrong. Well, one of the other things that's weird, and I've just noticed this and been thinking about it, is, and this is really a post-COVID thing in America, although I think in Europe, I first noticed this when I came to Europe from America, where this practice was unheard of. In England, I went to a movie theater and they made me buy a seat number, which sounds totally normal now because of, it's like the online purchasing of stuff means you have to pick your seat number. But I remember going into movie theaters not knowing any idea where I was going to sit, which is one of the reasons why over time I gravitated towards about the second or third row in a movie theater. It was a really big size screen, maybe third row, but I'd never get any further back because being in the middle was just like too many people. And but I remember this experience quite a bit. This experience has faded quite a bit. You go into a movie theater 20 minutes after it starts, and then you wait and start watching the next one. And you wait for another 20 minutes and watch it. That was a really common experience for a long time. That has disappeared. And the whole thing of now what I do is I'll buy my ticket. Again, I know exactly where I'm always sitting in these theaters here. It's always the second row, seat number 6 or something that puts me right in the center. I'll get it as soon. The tickets usually don't come on sale more than a week ahead of time, except in rare cases. But then what I'll do is I'll go sit there. One thing I start doing is I start noticing to see how full the theater is going to be, because I can look to see, okay, there's so many people at this showing. Some films I'm going to wait a bit because I don't necessarily want to see certain kinds of films with a lot of people. Bring Her Back would have been one of those, but it was partially full, and I could tell that there was like a whole Muslim family sitting next to me, and I talked to the older son, and his mother and sisters were visiting from Jordan, and I said, "Do they have any idea what this film is going to be about?" And he goes, "No, it's just a horror film." And I go, like, "Okay." And the guy was there to go to school and learn dentistry here in Georgia. So yeah, but I find it strange, this whole experience now where everyone buys their tickets before they get there. This does away with the lines. I don't know. Are there still lines for anything in America, or is it all buying your tickets ahead of time now? You tell me, because I haven't been there since. I haven't been in the movie-going experience in America since before COVID. So, what else is going on here? Yeah, whatever happened to Baby Jane would certainly be a subgenre of psycho women, because it would be, yeah. Although Hollywood, Sunset Boulevard, I definitely put in the film noir section. I have a pretty large film noir section. Whereas, whatever happened to Baby Jane and some of the films in the '60s is no longer noir, and noir has a certain aesthetic, and so I put all these things together. But it's a whole thing. It's like, how to file stuff is, to me, one of the most interesting things, and I love discussing it with people, because people will say, "Oh, no, that's really a science fiction film," and some people will go on and on. It's just like if you mention something like Silence of the Lambs, there are people who will die on the hill, but that's not a horror film. And I'm like, okay, I mean, it shows up in every horror book, but I guess you're right, because you know everything. But we get so invested, but that's how life is. No, we do not get whatever Fathom event movies are. They do not show up here. Remember, this is Georgia in Europe, on the edge of Asia. So, although we have a really small little theater now that is run by this Russian guy, and he's been showing some of his movie choices are just the stuff that was here that was a little more obscure, but he shows them a month later. But he did show a great movie called The Ugly Stepsister here, and I saw that in his little, got a little building, a floor, and it has a small room in it where you watch theater. So I'm going to see if I can get him to get what I really want to see is the new Quaid Brothers movie, In the House of the Hourglass Sanatorium, and that it's a new like puppet and live feature film. And for people who know that stuff, this is like you have to see it. And I'm behind. I've talked to them since it came out, and I haven't had a chance to see the movie yet. Okay. So while we're doing that, another thing that I did over on my Patreon channel, and again, this is another reason you should go over and join, is that I created I am creating videos over there that for one reason or another don't belong, or I'm just making them for Patreon. They're not very long. And so I've got one here as my tribute to Ozzy Osbourne. And I know James from 20th Century Music and Arts has already heard it. But this is
Greetings and welcome to the Anadromist. Although this is not going to appear on the Anadromist or the Anadrome or anywhere else, this is just a few thoughts for my Patreon channel. And I've been thinking about the passing of Ozzy Osbourne and what a fascinating character he is. And now I'm old enough to have, if I wished, gotten into Black Sabbath at the very beginning. I was following many other proto-metal bands, hard rock on its way to metal, so I certainly knew about Cream, Led Zeppelin, and was vaguely aware of Black Sabbath. But around the time they had their first album come out was the time I was beginning to question the music I was listening to as a youngster. And the reason I was questioning it was not because of the musicianship, but it was because of, it felt like the 60s was over and the music was now settling into something very different. That early 70s sound is very different than the late 60s sound. So for me, something like many bands, there were many bands at the beginning of the 70s, like Free or Frigid Pink or of these kind of bands. I liked that sound. I liked the heavier sound. But it didn't strike me as having that same searching quality that the music of the late 60s had had. It seemed like the quest had been given up. And what was left was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, which to me was a step way down. So, in 1970, I ended up becoming a Christian through the Jesus People movement, which put me on a very different track musically. I started making my own music around that time, but it was a very different sort of thing. Later, I became very focused on punk rock, but I kind of skipped that early 70s period, which is, of course, the heyday of Black Sabbath. So when I did catch up to them in the 80s, it was after knowing, Ozzy as a solo act had not come out yet. But I did appreciate them, just as I appreciated AC/DC, and there were some other bands of a similar type that I really liked in the early 80s. But as I looked at Ozzy, of course, I started to see him through the lens of his solo career. And so while I appreciated him, I didn't feel like investigating the past all that much. But then came the grunge era, and at that point I started noticing how many bands were affected by Black Sabbath, and so belatedly I kind of dived in. Now, Ozzy is a very interesting character as I look back, and the reason he is, I mean, his childhood is just terrifying. I mean, including stints in prison, and I mean, it's amazing he lived as long as he did. But music became something very important for him, and he really wanted to make something that he called like doomy music or really intense music. And he was influenced by people like Jimi Hendrix. Without Hendrix, there would be no Black Sabbath, because Hendrix really kind of upped the ante on heaviness for everyone. But also, he was very influenced by Hammer horror and British horror, hence the name Black Sabbath, which comes from the name of a movie. And that was something very important. So they borrowed the dissonant, tritonal music of some of the soundtracks. I think it was Bernard James did for Hammer horror films, which were always, it's interesting, the songs were always done to the beat of the title. So it was like, do, 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 that would be Dracula, do, 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 Black Sabbath, you think? But I get it now. I get why Sabbath is so important, because essentially they set a template, and Ozzy himself never really understood the heavy metal moniker. I remember at one point he says, I don't know, heavy metal is like mercury or lead, what does that mean? You know, just in his typical Ozzy fashion. And yet that is exactly, along with Led Zeppelin, who really rejected the label heavy metal. But those kind of groups set some of the templates for heavy metal. So with Ozzy, it was the heavy stuff, the dark imagery, and the Zeppelin was more the fantasy element, which also creeps into heavy metal. But without going into much more about heavy metal or Black Sabbath, I just want to say the thing that struck me at the end about Ozzy is how despised their music was and how revered he was in the end. It's a very interesting trajectory in life. And it was despised because, well, there was a division back in the 70s between the people who listened to the critics in Rolling Stone and the people who listened to the critics in Cream magazine. And Cream was always in favor of the kind of guitar-heavy bands and such like that. And of course, Black Sabbath would have been chief among them. But Rolling Stone the critics always were kind of like, this stuff is just too primitive, not enough going on, too mono-focused on heaviness. Well, over time, and I think it happened through the thrash era and the new wave of British metal. Black Sabbath's name became more and more important. And then, during the grunge era, it became clear that everyone from Soundgarden to Nirvana and Black Flag earlier than that in the hardcore scene had been supping at the table of Black Flag. Now, I'm a Christian still, and I just heard someone who I won't mention who do a video on the problems with Black Sabbath's lyrics and such. And I get that from a Christian perspective. It's like it's too dark, it's focused on the devil and stuff like that. But then again, if you have that problem with early heavy metal, and I'm distinguishing between early heavy metal and later period, is that you're going to have to also question what you think about, the Book of Revelation. You're going to have to question what you think about the play Faust, of a man who sells his soul to the devil, and the devil comes to claim it at the end. Things like that, because the early heavy metal was never about becoming one with the devil or even using the devil as a symbol of rebellion. It was instead about fighting the devil or about, being afraid of the devil's effects upon you, running from the devil, which I think is a very different thing. Now, what's interesting is Ozzy was baptized in Anglican when he was young, Church of England. And later, he always kind of had something in his mind, as messed up as it might have been, about faith. But I think what's really fascinating is when I looked at the tributes to him, so how many of the younger people mentioned God in relationship to him. And evidently, he was talking about God quite a bit in his Ozzy fashion, which is to say he wasn't giving sermons or everything, but he would say, like, you need to read the Bible, or why was he wearing crosses? I'm sure there's some sort of, iconic reason, but I don't think that was it. And I was just listening to someone telling, before Ozzy would go on the stage, he like near the end, he was always like, I have to have my Bible with me, which is quite an odd thing for someone who was the Prince of Darkness. Now, he didn't name himself that. That's what other people called him. But I look at him, I look at his music. There is something Christian about it in that Faustian sense. It's about the dark side of the sell your soul to the devil side. And I think Ozzy was kind of aware of that. And at the same time, he feared that. And he put that into his music. And I think I'm told he would pray before singing and all of these things. And he was very open about these things. It wasn't like he was a closet believer in God. Now, what kind of a Christian he was? No clue. Absolutely no clue. It's not up to me to judge. But here's the interesting thing. So on one hand, you can look at all the demonic music that came after him. And frankly, there are people in the latter part of the metal journey who now use Satan as the emblem of rebellion. And starting with groups like Bathory and, you get to, King Diamond and people like that. And later you have people like Marilyn Manson, who is definitely anti-God, anti-religion. But Ozzy was never like one of those people. He was a bit of a holy fool in a weird way. He certainly did not treat himself well. But then again, if you look at where he started from, and then look at him in the context of any superstar rock performer from the 1970s, again, it's amazing he survived. There's an interesting contrast here between him and Alice Cooper, Vincent Furnier. And Alice and he actually got along fairly well. Earlier, there was a lot of tussling back and forth between the two of them because they were kind of in competition. And there was some friction. But I think both of them recognized in the other an honest person. Later, Alice Cooper becomes a Christian, gives up his crazy ways. And I think Ozzy recognized that. He himself was, I think, a weaker character as far as his actual character than Alice Cooper. But I think Ozzy was also really honest and genuine. And I think that people saw that. And so it's interesting how many of the younger musicians in their tributes to him mention God. I'm watching a bunch of them. It was on the Loudwire video channel, and I just saw every other one would be like something about God. And he would say at the end of his shows, God bless you. So it's just really fascinating. So how should we see dear old departed Ozzy? I think he's like a gargoyle on the outside of the church. He's not in it. But he represents something about facing the darkness, not being afraid of it. And let's put Ozzy as a gargoyle on the cathedral of the church. Okay, well, that's it. This is just for the Patreon people. And the reason it's just for the Patreon people is because I don't want to attract the kind of people. The thing about heavy metalers is they're awfully sectarian. That is to say, they have their own sects and cults. And if you say too much of this or too much of that, they just dogpile on you. And I'm not interested in attracting that kind of person. So, I hand this to you.
Okay, so that was my take from my Patreon on Ozzy Osbourne. And if you want more odd takes on things that you're not going to get on my regular channel, that was about 15 minutes long, which would be a very short video for me normally. The Superman one was about 5 minutes. If you want those kind of videos, you should go sign up for Patreon. And like I said, the link is down below. But like I said, the actual prices are going to raise, and I have to do this because, like I say, by the time I'm done, 30% is shaved off by Patreon and PayPal and my bank here in Georgia. So, what am I going to do? I purposely set it up so I get the money here. I'm rethinking that, but at the moment, what can I say? I chose to live in this crazy country of Georgia, which I love doing, and at the same time, it does present its logistical difficulties. So, what else is going on out here? Discussions about Geezer Butler writing the lyrics from a Catholic perspective for Ozzy. I think that's really fascinating. People, and there's a lot of bands like this that it rides this edge. It's a very Faustian edge. Because the Faust story can be seen as a very Christian story of a man who sells his soul to the devil, then realizes his mistake. And in the classic version by Christopher Marlowe, at the end, he wants all this knowledge and everything. And he says, I'll burn my books, all the stuff that I wanted for this power, but it's too late at the end of that. I like that version because it's the darkest one. The Goethe Faust is more hopeful. And sometimes I think we need darker versions of stories, more like a horror story. And I think there are many elements in horror stories that are Christian as well, which is one of the reasons I am always interested in them, because they're dealing with the darker part. And I know we Americans tend to want to always be positive and optimistic, which to me is a grave fault. And it's a fault based on a misunderstanding of one of the aspects of the Christian message. And for instance, St. Paul says at one point, all things work out to the good for those who are in Christ Jesus. And what secular culture has simply done is cut off those last three words, those in Christ Jesus, or that phrase, and just make it all things work out to the good, which to me is like, really? Have you looked at the world lately? No. Things don't all work out for the good. 70 million people died in World War II. You're going to have a hard time pointing out that all things worked for the good during that period. So, yeah, that's my take. That's one of the reasons why I find the darker side of human nature really interesting, because I would much rather be prepared for the dark than to walk through the streets really surprised. Some of the most cynical and disturbed people I've met are people who were told as they were growing up to always be positive. And then sometime in their late 20s or something, after they've gotten out of the cocoon of living a nice, comfortable, upper middle class life, they get slapped in the face with the reality of things. And then suddenly they are just, they just become so despondent because they aren't prepared. So anyway, that's my thinking. Okay, so I have a question before I go on. And one of the things I am working on is I want to make a video called What is a Man? And I have all sorts of ideas for it, but rather than unravel all that right now, I'd like to get some of your takes, because often the people who follow me are men, although there are certainly women. Any women out there right now? If there are, identify yourself. But I think that the issue of, what do men do with themselves in the 21st century? They're certainly not going out and being hunters and gatherers. They're certainly, or hunters rather. They're not. They're not. We are often. It's implied that there is no place anymore for traditional male values. I don't agree with that at all. But nevertheless, and I think, for instance, if you're below, say, the age of 30 or even 35, you what really good images of masculinity do you even have? I mean, there's been a lot of online discourse, but for me, one of the things about being a man is it's not about being online. And I've been recently thinking there used to be places, the movie theater I went to was in a shopping mall, big new shopping mall here. I don't know how they are in your area, but here they're new, and people are like, "Wow, shopping malls!" Uh, and it's amazing. You walk through there, and there is the only places a man would feel comfortable going and shopping in this huge shopping mall with maybe 100 different stores is the hardware store, the liquor store, and, well, of course, shopping for food. There's one big grocery store, supermarket, hypermarket there. Guys got to get pillows, and even the men's stores there look to me kind of like, I don't want to go to that. It's just like, it's just. So, what do you guys think? Any thoughts out there about how you're seeing being a man in this world? Like I say, I'm not going to unspiel my whole thing here. That will come in time. But I want to get a few of your thoughts, if you're willing to part with them. Ooh, I like the name Lily Patinka. So, wasn't Marlowe an atheist? You know what? There's no proof of that. And the fact of the matter is, there were very few atheists during that period. We tend to reinterpret things by, the lights of the late 20th, early 21st century. And Marlowe, nobody who's an atheist is going to write the tragical history of Dr. Faustus, because that person thinks. See, for instance, a lot of people think Edgar Allan Poe is an atheist, and it's just like, you kind of have to pull up the carpet a little bit on that one, and you'll see he certainly wasn't. He's always mentioning God. Likewise, Marlowe. What do we know about Marlowe? Very little. We have so, and what people will say all sorts of ridiculous things about Shakespeare, whereas it's like, look in the text and you'll see what he believes, and it's there, because I would say we didn't really start getting contemporary style atheists until the Enlightenment, and because prior to that, everyone kind of thought there was a God. What they were worried about was, what is my relationship to this God? I'm probably a sinner. I don't like where I'm going. And that's what Marlowe's Faust is. It is not a tract about atheism. It's a tract about maybe we've sold our souls to the devil. And we gotta think about that. So, what else we got out here? Yeah. Oh, James points out a thing here, and I'll come back to some of your other questions. Let's see. And James says that he hates shopping for clothes. Give me a bookstore or a record store. And that is precisely the kind of thing that is missing from the shopping experience now. It's all gone online. See, the guys are online looking for stuff, but they're not in the physical world as much as they used to be. So when I had all sorts of great conversations and experiences in record stores, in bookstores, in video stores. There used to, when I grew up, there were all sorts of strange little hobby stores, like a place where you could go and buy electric trains. Who do you think was going to that? Or a place where you could go buy model cars, and race them, you know. What's happened is the male experience has really been, essentially men have been left sitting at home in front of screens. And it's very difficult. One of the things that's missing is there's no third places. So a comic book store would have been a third place. And I remember having lots of conversations with people in comic book stores, with particularly guys. But for various reasons, those became, more commercialized during the, Marvel kind of took over these places. And that was near the tail end of this experience. There was a transition into, I remember in New York City, in indie record store. Now, I had the perfect situation where my boss would leave in this really tiny little hole-in-the-wall place in the Soho area, and I would kind of hold court. People would come in, and we just have conversations. That's what's missing. Guys don't have a place for conversations except online, and I think Paul Vanderklay's Estuary is a great idea, and as long as it's online, it will remain as all other things online do. And that is to say, impotent, because it can't produce. Men need to be out in the world, and men have kind of been pushed back away from it by their own choice. So, what else have we got? Have I seen What is a Woman? Yes, I have. And now, of course, Matt Walsh is doing something very satirical as well as trying to prove a point. I like what he's doing there. It's a very funny movie. But at the same time, when I say what is a man, that is not what I'm thinking about at all. It's in terms of, I'm not out to prove any sort of point like that. I just think in my own life, I've had experiences that tell me more about, for instance, one of the things that most young teenage boys and men do not get is they do not get, there are fewer and fewer options. See, I think I've thought about, like, why are teenage boys and girls together in the same school? There's a real problem here. And the problem is they develop at different speeds. And so that means that the teenage boys have to think they are cleverer than they are to go out with the teenage girls, and they aren't. And who the teenage boys need to be around is not the teenage girls. They need to be around the older, like guys in their 20s and 30s and older. Why? Because they cannot prove to be at all cleverer than them. In other words, I got lucky because when I was young, I became a Christian at the age of 15. Then at the age of 17, I ended up on these Jesus People communes. So there's a whole story there. But one of the best things that happened to me was I would be sent out to work with guys who were older than me. And they would not let me get away with being lazy or stupid or anything. They just weren't doing that. Now, here's the thing. No woman can do that to a young man. So you have young men in our society who think they know all this stuff. Whereas anyone who's slightly older looks at them and goes, no, you don't. You know, and that's what's missing, is that sense of passing that on. It's a whole lot more. But without that, we've ended up in this very weird thing of, it's strange now on TikTok. You find people who, it's like girls who will say things like, oh, he's 3 years older. That's a big age gap. I'm sitting there going like, idiot, don't you get, it was always the guys had to be 3 to 5 or 6 years older. Why? Because the women are more advanced, and guys, it takes getting, being around older guys who will say like, stop thinking about the girls all the time. You need to start thinking about doing your work and getting ahead. So, but don't get me started. Yeah, formal men's clothes. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. How do you buy formal men's clothes? Now, what I remember when I grew up was you'd walk into a shoe store or you'd walk into a men's clothing store, and the vibe there was totally different than walking into either a department store or certainly any store that sold to women. Now, for instance, when I'm in these large shopping malls that are here, the men's stores look almost the same, identical to the women's stores. And to me, that's a big problem. And it makes me want to, like, I don't want to go into this super brightly lit thing with white walls. For once, the environment is just like overwhelmingly sterile. You know, these old stores I'm talking about used to have, like, like if you walked into a shoe store, there'd be all these shelves of wood made out of wood and cabinets. It's just like, where did all that stuff go? That was just incredible. Or you'd walk into a men's store and there was just a whole different vibe about it. You didn't feel ashamed of being in there. Whereas now, and I think this goes with the kind of unisex way clothes are dealt with and other things. I think that yeah, well, we're kind of lost on all that stuff, quite frankly. And I'm not saying I have the answer. I'm just saying this is a problem. Because I'll probably die before this is solved, need to work on it. My son and I started talking to a guy who was fishing in a boat near your house, and it was a nice, natural conversation. Exactly. Right. Well, also, that's one of the things. See, there used to be many places for men to go. So whether it was at the Union Hall or whether it was like in New York City, there were like chess clubs and stuff. Not that in that situation you couldn't have women. It's just less likely to find them there. And again, in all these kind of various hobby shops and stuff, men would be sitting there and arguing in a way in which if you throw a woman into that mix, she might get offended. Whereas guys generally will say things to kind of push back at each other. And that's how, for instance, I think the younger men learn something about being a man. And unfortunately, we have so neutered male and female in a certain way that we've just made these equal beings. Everyone's the same. And yet it's not working very well. And then where it really gets difficult is when you take someone from a society where they still have a very strong difference between male and female. I'm looking at the Muslim world here. And you throw those people into, say, Europe, then you start getting conflicts because, well, it's just what's happening. Because you have these younger men who, I'm not saying they were treated, they learned things well or whatever, but I am saying that just breeds a lot of problems. They don't necessarily know anymore, but there isn't a culture to respond back to them because essentially in the West we've become kind of squishy. We don't, it's just, if you say anything about Christianity that's too harsh, very few people are going to get up on their hind legs about it, except for some people way out in the middle of the boonies somewhere who still kind of think in the older way, which I'm not opposed to. Hey, Nick. Good to see you. Yes, the whole thing of manliness. Yeah, well, in Alaska, I was around fishermen, and fishermen just, and there would be women who would go on there, but once the woman gets on the fishing boat, she is no longer treated like a woman. She is treated like a man, which is to say, you've got a lot of hard work to do, and it's going to be physical, and you have to follow the fish. But I think it's even more important for the young men. Also, I think that, like I say, when I grew up, we would be sent out from these Christian communes. One of the ways we made money was doing work for people. Sometimes it would be yard work. Oh gosh, I remember some of the jobs that we were given to do. I was sent out with a really bad lawnmower that I constantly had to push it, pull on the cord to get it to start. And the hill was slanted like that. So you're working on the side of a hill, and then just all of this, because in California it was all dry grasses going into your face. I eventually developed hay fever as a result of these kinds of jobs. But also, I learned that, for instance, I also dealt with the animals, and I brought them from the cradle to the grave. Now that will grow you up, because you realize you cannot be, wishy-washy about them. They're animals, and if you don't do the right thing, you will find yourself in deep trouble, particularly around animals as large as pigs and cows and such, but also even goats. And I mean, there was a goat that I took care of that could have easily broken your arm because he had horns that went out to like this, and if he twists your hand really quickly in the horns, you'd break your arm. So you had to be very careful. Interestingly enough, when I got to New York City, I certainly spent a good deal of time hanging out with pretty countercultural characters. And what was fascinating to me is that whenever I would get onto some of these kind of work-related subjects or animal husbandry-related subjects, all of their demonstration, their show of being this weird countercultural character would just kind of slink off into the corner because they couldn't deal with that kind of thing. They didn't know how to do hard work. They didn't know how to do, certainly anything to do with animals. All they knew how to do was to go and play really weird music in clubs and stuff like this. But even that seems to me far more important than staying at home and getting everything through this. So, yeah. What else have we got? What else are we thinking? Yeah, I would say that, I've been thinking about this. One of the things I'm thinking about is the need for third spaces again for men. And so many of them have been taken away. One of the only things that, is kind of a man's space is sports. But unfortunately, most of that has been pushed back to the television set at home. So I've never been a person who cared that much about the game, or whatever. Video games are a similar problem. It's taking it back to the home. Now, undoubtedly, there's male contact when guys are together, but unfortunately, they are mostly isolated. One of the things that's interesting about the fact that if you walk into a mall, most of these stores are focused on women, is that it gives women a reason to go out of the house and go shopping. I often have a theory that men don't go shopping, men go buying, and women shop. And shopping is a much more engaging process. You have to think about what you're buying. You have to, you have to think about how it would fit. How is it going to wear it? How are you going to wear it? What are you going to do with it? How will other people respond to you? How much can I get this for? Is it worth spending my money on? Whereas buying is just going in and go like, yeah, I really want this. You're gone. And men tend to do that, which is one reason why men, for instance, record collecting now or Blu-ray collecting are niche hobbies. Many stores do not cater to these hobbies anymore. Specifically, if you're outside of either college towns or the big cities, you're going to be very hard-pressed to find these kinds of things there. But the niche market online is bigger than the old market used to be because it's also global. So there are more people, in a sense, around the world buying records than there were people in the 1960s buying records. The difference is that you can't walk into your local appliance store that has a pretty good selection of records that ranges from easy listening to, you know, the latest rock records in an appliance store. In other words, it's not a common thing anymore. And that's where we have our problems, is that when men go out of the house, well, they can go to the bar, they can go to a game, they can go to the hardware store. Henry Rollins has a whole take on it. It says he turned 50, and he says suddenly the hardware store looks totally different to me now. And it's true. The more you start thinking about what you can make and stuff, the hardware store actually is a very male space, especially at little ones. I go to some little ones here, and you walk into these places, and it's kind of like, okay, this is all do-it-yourself. This is great. You know, there's a couple of chains here, but I like the little ones that are funky and individual. But even I remember going to bookstores, little funky independent bookstores. Even the chains, you can go in there and find weird stuff. Now, of course, the bookstores were much more of a male and female situation, but men used to go buy books. Who do you think bought all those World War II books? Who do you think bought, you know, I mean, just so many, you know, all the science fiction books and horror books and stuff. I mean, women bought a few, but it was mostly men. Whereas now, men don't go shopping. They sit isolated at home, which creates a lot of, I think, emotional problems. Which is one of the reasons why when I travel, and here, I know where all the bookstores are, because that's important to me. Get out of the house and go do something. It's too easy to get stuck in the house. What do we got? Weed whacking, yes. Although you're still at weed waking, so maybe we're waking up the weeds. Yeah. I like that dog catcher. Teenage kids used to have summer jobs in a way in which it's become more of a rarity. You know, for instance, now it's so easy to think of. This does not happen here in Georgia. In Georgia, all the people at your McDonald's and such are going to be Georgians. Whereas in America, so many young kids are embarrassed to go work at a fast food place. They want things just basically done for them. They want to be influencers. They want to be something that's like physically easy. Whereas I think there's a great deal to learn from doing either summer jobs. You were saying summer jobs in the forest and such. I think that's great. I spent 2 seasons working in Glacier National Park in Montana. That was very important, although that was more of it was the late 70s, and people were, it was really sad. I remember there was a campfire and everyone was singing John Denver songs. I was just like, oh gosh. I mean, now people hardly sing at all. So there's a thing from people used to sing actual folk songs to then it was pop songs, Beatles and John Denver, and then it's nothing. And there's a chorus there. All those things are important. But what other thoughts have we got? Okay, James, see you. Thanks for dropping in. Yeah, weed whacking in Orinda. That sounds Californian. Is that where that is? Yeah, well, the mall used to be a very important place for people to go. And as you pointed out, Michael, so many malls in America are dying. What's killing it? Online shopping and deliveries, you know? And the fact that, for instance, for most guys, there's no reason to get out of the house. I mean, and I think that's a shame. So I think it's up to us to come up with reasons to get out of the house and to have third spaces. The thing about the third space, and here's where I have my problems with the estuary idea, is the estuary idea is good as an introduction to getting together and talking. But it can't be the real thing, because the real thing requires something that the estuary doesn't do. Because when Paul does this thing, he invites everyone, have you got a topic? Well, that's just too general. And I think what men prefer is they prefer the specific. They'd rather go to someplace, and if they're into horror, talk about horror movies or books or whatever. They'd rather talk about rock and roll. They'd rather talk about cars. They'd rather talk about building a house. They'd rather talk about very specific, tangible things. And that's what's missing. so many of these very specific kinds of things are no longer a part of the equation, you know, and they have, for men, been put online. And that's a devil's bargain, speaking of the Faustian bargain. Yeah, that's a good point there. Yes, Orinda. Yeah, I thought Orinda was in the San Francisco Bay Area. It sounded like someplace that, because I grew up in San Rafael and Petaluma. Yeah, of course. Michael says fast food sounded horrible. Of course, but you need that. You see, you need to face, you know, this is what a mindless, dull job is, you know, in order to understand the problems. And also the fact that you have to be there at a certain time, do work that you find difficult or repetitious. A bit of that is helpful. I mean, I worked, oh gosh, just in places that are just ridiculous. I mean, without going into the difficult stuff like working in a mental institution. You know, I used to take people to see bears in Alaska, but without getting into that kind of stuff. No, I remember working at a place sorting shop rags, oily, greasy, metal splintered filled shop rags. And I got in trouble for not counting 1,000 an hour through an electric eye. Boy, that made me think about life. I got out of there as soon as I could. I had a worse job in New York City for literally 2 weeks. It was so bad. It was working as an answering service for New Yorkers, which was right at the worst place in New York City, right next to the Port Authority bus terminal. I spent 2 weeks there and said, God, get me out of here. I'll do anything than this. This was just so depressing. But sometimes you need that to realize, okay, I'm not down there. Let's build ourselves up. Yeah, well, it's like I was always sent out as a kid, even before my Jesus People days. I was sent out to do yard work for old ladies. I had a paper route, and between the ages of, say, 11 and 15, I was constantly doing things like weeding for old ladies and families and such. I mean, hardly any money doing it, but that, I look back on it and go, like, yeah, that was really good. It put me in touch with things. It also made me hate weeds. And there was one woman, Seventh-day Adventist, and she said, no, we don't eat meat. So here's a tomato sandwich. I was like, tomato sandwich? And then I tried it, and I was like, oh, that's not bad. You learn. That's the thing, is to be exposed to the actual world, to get up against the inertia and the entropy of the world. And that is the value of it. And I think men are more, to me, men deal with the outside better. And they need, so in order to do so, they need to be outside. They need to go out into the world. Women, to me, represent the inside. You can argue that, but that's how I see it. They represent the center of the family and such. Men put the walls up. You know. So, okay. Well, let me play you a song here, and we'll go on for a little bit longer. This is an Irish song called the Rocky Road to Dublin. Speaking of male songs, this is a very male song about kind of guy just getting in trouble. And it's a great song too. So let's hear the Rocky Road to Dublin by the Dubliners. No, is this Dubliners? Yeah, it is. So
now, if you want to learn English properly, you've got to be able to sing the chorus of this song after hearing it once. Okay, it goes like this.
Nearly broken hearted salute to father dear. Kissed me now and mother drank a pint of beer. With life and tears to swallow that up to reap the corn. Before I was born, at the stout McMahon, the Spanish ghosts Friday night, this morning late, and there he tucked and rubbing the pure to keep me heart from sinking. That's the baddest cure. Whenever he's up and thinking, they hear the lassie smile, laughing all the while. That be curious then, when such a heart above me asked me was I hired. Wages iron and points, and I was always head of the rocky road to double and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hot the hair and turn her down the rocky road, and all the ways to double and whack for lolly-da. And Dublin got a place, it looks so weary, started Friday night, next morning late, and there he took the drum of the cure. Keep me back from sinking, that's the baddest cure. Whenever he's up and thinking, they hear the lassie smile, laughing all the while. Happy curious then, was such a heart above me asked me was I hired. Wages iron and points, and I was always treading the rocky road to double and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hot the hair and turn her down the rocky road, and all the ways to double and whack for lolly-da. In Dublin next to ride, and all that's such a pity to be so soon the pride. The view of it when city ran and took a stroll, all among the quality Byrne looked the stone. In the neat locality something crossed me mind, when I looked behind the one that caught I find the Byrne stick, the one requiring for the road. They said me corner broke, wasn't much in the rocky road, double and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hot the hair and turn her down the rocky road, and all the ways to double and whack for lolly-da. From there I got away, my spirits never failing, landed on the Thames, as the ship was sailing, Captain Anthony Board said to me, body when I jumped aboard the cabin for body. Down among the pigs, did some hearty rigs, danced some hearty jigs, the water rubbed bubbling, and when the body head wished myself was there, I bent a fire and set on the rocky road, and double and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hot the hair and turn her down the rocky road, and all the ways to double and whack for lolly-da. The boys of Liverpool, when we safely landed, called himself a fool. I took the road as land and blood began to boil. Temper I was losing poor old Aaron's while. Bathing and abusing her army souls as if he should naily I'd fly. Galway boys were mine, and so I was the humble and grim, allowed to raid the joy and the dear prey. Quickly cleared away from the rocky road to double and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hot the hair and turn her down the rocky road, and all the ways to double and whack for lolly-da.
The Dubliners. I love that song. It's if you listen to the lyrics, it's a very rough and rowdy song. And what I like about it is not that everything it says is morally pure in any sense, but rather it's about kind of the rough and tumble of life and how you just get up. Something's difficult, you get up and you keep going. And Michael was just saying. And Michael, I know, is younger, and how he's very isolated. You grow up in this isolation, so you don't know how. I mean, social awkwardness is like some sort of disease for Gen Z and below, and they don't know how to go out into the world because they're being pushed online. Whereas, as I wrote here, my experience was, when I was young, I got chased through a creek by a couple of 2, 3 bullies, and they caught me, and they gave me a wedgie, and they pushed my face into the mud. And Americans in the teens of the 21st century would talk about, "Oh my God, you've been bullied." To which the answer is, yeah, and it wasn't a great experience. However, I learned, okay, so that's what you guys are going to do. And I never let them do that to me again, for one reason or another. It's a longer story. But eventually, as I got older in high school, I looked at these guys and I realized, man, these guys have it bad. They come from troubled homes. And my home wasn't perfect, but it wasn't as bad as theirs. And I realized, I am not the person here who is suffering. They are. And that's the thing, is when you learn what people can do, you start also seeing inside of their minds better. So, let's see. I got one more song before we get out of here. Any more questions or thoughts about anything I've we've done the mail thing pretty good, and I appreciate this because it gives me some sort of idea of when I do it, what kind of questions we have. Not that this is all, because one of the nice things about this channel is I have some people here who are in their 70s, 80. I think one guy is in his 80s. I've also got some people who are in their teens, and there's a spectrum of different people. I would say the majority of people who watch my channel are boys, men, but there are a significant number of women as well. And I've got a couple of things on my mind for the ladies. And one is I'm going to deal with the relationship between philosophy, not in the academic sense, but in the sense of worldview and fashion, and how these things have changed over the years, and how what people believe changes what they wear, along with other elements of technology. And I'm going to do, like I said, I wanted to do something contrasting how women and men shop. And I mentioned that a bit here, but I want to get into it in a bit more depth, as well as the what is a man thing. Those are things I'm just bubbling away. You may not see them for a few months, but there they are. Although the fashion philosophy thing is very close to the surface. So let's see, what are you saying, Nick? Well, exactly. They're talking about going to bars. And that's one of the last bastions. But even in certain sized cities, the bars become, they're not like the cowboy bar, you know, where the guy's sitting at the thing nursing a beer or something. You can have these very fashionable bars. But for me, what I want to do is talk with people about stuff. Now, I have the ability that a lot of people don't do. And it's not something, anybody can learn this. But I know how to invite people over to my house for conversation. I also know how to extend the conversation. So, on my birthday, this is what I did. My birthday was, the 22nd of July. This is what I did. I invited a group of friends. There were 8 of us all together. And I told them, you can't come unless you bring a story. And the story you have to bring is about one of the stupidest things you've ever done in your life. It can be life-threatening. It can be a simple story, but you have to bring a story. Now, I've done this with other subjects as well around Halloween time, bring us a story of something involving fear that you've experienced. I've done it with other subject matters as well. Tell us a story about winter or something. So this was really great to have the stupid thing, because of course, you start listening to what people are saying and you go like, it opens them up, it makes them vulnerable, and you realize, oh, this guy I thought was really smart did some really stupid stuff. Like we all do. It brings us together. And we need conversation. And sometimes I just invite a guy or two. I have a friend coming over on Tuesday, and we'll have a very rough and tumble conversation about life in Georgia and such. He's an American. I have another friend or two who are Georgians, and I'll invite them over, and we'll talk about stuff. And to me, conversation is the key, pretty much everything. If you want to understand the Bible, you need to have some conversations. If you want to understand time and your place in time, you need to talk to people. And this, as much as I appreciate you being here, and the fact that you are going to go join my Patreon, which the link is below, just a reminder, you need to have conversations in the real world. I appreciate this, but let's call this what it is. We're being mediated heavily through the platform of YouTube. So what else have we got? Yeah, that's a good joke. Okay, Michael, give us another one. What are you thinking here? Well, that's a good story. How do you talk to people whose only references are to things like anime and video games? Well, I can do it, and I can do it through two different means. One, I can be the Martian, and what I mean by that is Tom Wolfe, the writer, was really good from that. He says, "I'm the man from Mars. I don't know anything about what you're doing. Tell me about it." So, if I meet someone who does something I don't do at all, like fly an airplane, I would say, "Okay, so you fly an airplane. I've never done that. What's that like? Tell me some stories." Now, the thing about anime, find out if you know anything about it yourself, you can ask what they like and talk about stories. If you don't know anything about it, and then you can still say, why do you watch it? What do you get from this? Again, the man from Mars approach. People always appreciate it because now there are some people who say like, well, you don't understand and such. Oh, that's fine. You don't have to talk to them. But if a person has these kinds of things, now obviously with video games, one thing, I used to be much more against video games than I am now. I'm still not into them at all. I don't like wasting my time on them. I have played a few just to feel how it feels. But what I noticed is a lot of the pushback on the hyper political correctness stuff started from these gamers because they had a certain kind of an attitude. So I said, that's interesting. Let's talk about that attitude. You see, so I found a way to connect, even though these things, I actually got into anime and manga back in the late 80s, and then realized it was too big a world. I was even trying to draw some of it, although what I drew was completely bizarre looking because I wasn't trying to do anime. I was just using some of the techniques. So, yeah, you can talk with anyone. You just have to find a way to talk to them. And again, online, not the best place. Why? People's personalities change online. It's like road rage. The same person who will indulge in road rage isn't necessarily like that outside of the car. Likewise, the person who will engage in really caustic behavior online as far as responding to people isn't that way in reality most of the time, or maybe they are. So I notice every now and then I get someone who will say some really cutting thing, and I try never to respond in kind. Never, although I'm tempted to, that's for sure. Say something. I mean, if you want me to show that I can be as just cynical and ironic as you are, I can do that. But I don't prefer to do that. I prefer to try to find the humanity. Some people, however, will not allow that, especially online. So, yeah, which is why you have to find places to meet people in the real world. And we can talk about this more. Well, I am getting tired, and I'm going to play one more song. Any last minute thoughts or questions before I get out of here? If there are, this is your chance. I'm getting something ready to play now, and when we're done playing that, we will get out of here. I know what I'll do. I will. No, I'll just play one song. I have a song that's called "Miri It Is," which means "Merry It Is." It's merry. It's joyful. By a group, an English group called Vocantus, and it's the singing of an old medieval song. So, last call for thoughts. This is your chance. I'll wait another 30 seconds, and then I'll play the song, and then I'm out of here. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you. What's great about the people on my channel is somehow I got pretty lucky. I don't have lots of followers, but I have some pretty good ones. People who make some pretty good comments, as you have demonstrated today, and I appreciate that. a lot of thoughtful people, and that doesn't happen on every channel. Yes, peaches are grown here in the other Georgia, although they prefer apricots or apricots. And they grow very well here. It's the perfect climate for it. But then again, the country is, for the size of the country, which is smaller than the American Georgia, they have a far wider variety of climatic conditions, ranging from mountains that are about 15,000 feet, 5,000 meters tall, down to the Black Sea, which is essentially very similar in climate to the Mediterranean. And that's why the wine is really important here. But some of the foods they really like to grow here are like walnuts and pomegranates and apricots and peaches and other kinds of fruits. Also, we're right near Turkey, so we get a lot of vegetables and fruit from them. And the mountains have cows in them because the mountains are actually very gently sloped. And so a lot of our meat comes from here as well. And it's the perfect thing to do with the cows and the mountains because they like each other. And so. Okay. Thanks for being with me today. Let's listen to this song, and by the time that's done, I'll be done. And remember, if you haven't checked out my Patreon, link is down below. Go do it and support the channel, especially if you're coming to this video later. Enjoy.
Nicht ist long, aber ich will mich long.